So we're going to see
Exactly.
him here in just a little bit. But for now, what do you say, Brian? We get started.
I think so. Let's do it.
All right, let's do it. Let's get started. Welcome to the weekly roadmap call. Today is Friday, January 10th. Thank you so much for being here, you guys. My name is Maria Elena James, and I'm the executive producer of the call. And we have here Brian Hale, your call leader. I'm going to go over just a quick agenda topics here. So every single time we get on this call, I tell you a little bit about the weekly roadmap, what it's all about, just in case you're new to this call. Thank you for being here once again. Brian's going to give you a market update. So what Brian does before this call is he gets all the data, not only from Monday, not from last week, but current data from today, puts it all together for you guys, then explains it all to you, and then tells you how you can use it. So thank you for being here. And that's what we're going to do here at the beginning of the call. The second half of the call is going to be with our fabulous guest speaker, Diego Sanchez, president of HousingWire. We're so excited for him to be here. Thank you so much, Diego, for being here with us. You're going to see him here in just about 20 minutes. Brian always has personal development for you guys and great strategies and tips and all those kind of things. And as always, this call is live, which means that you can ask a question live. If you want to ask a question live, go to your profile, ask to be unmuted. I will unmute your line and you can ask a question to Brian and or Diego when he comes online. This is all about community. We help each other out here. We have great guest speakers. We have great content through the desktop version and also the app. We have a newsletter that's published every single Friday. We have that in the community site as well. And of course, through these calls and through all of our content, we have fabulous coaching for you guys. So thank you for being here. And if you're not a member, please consider being a member. As I mentioned, the app, we do have an app associated with the Weekly Roadmap. It looks just like this through the Apple Store and or Google Play Stores. Weekly Roadmap, all one word. Type it into your Apple Store or Google Play Store, and you'll find it after you become a member. You can download that app. And then once you become a member, I offer site tours to help you navigate and learn the site and the app as well. Thursdays, 9 a.m. Pacific, only for 30 minutes. You can click on that registration to register, and I'll be happy to navigate you through the Weekly Roadmap site.
Maria Elena, is that recorded and is it up on the site? If somebody wanted to go up, they can just simply watch it on their own pace as well.
It's not recorded today, Brian, but that's a great, great
Let's do
suggestion.
that.
Next week,
Yeah,
we'll capture a recording and then we'll put a recording up on the site as well if you guys want to replay
it's a
that.
great idea.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you for that. And then we also have membership free through the end of March of this year. And then, of course, we're working on a fabulous contest that we're going to announce here just in the next few weeks as well. Again, don't forget to download the app if you're a member. And if you become a member, that's the first step. Second step is download the app. At this time, I would like to turn the call over to Brian Hale, once again, your call leader, to talk to you guys a little bit about the Joe Massey courses. Brian?
Thank you, Maria Elena. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the rest of your life of 2025. It's going to be an interesting morning with all the data that came out this week and certainly this morning. Very quickly, we've talked about this in the past. You know, Joe Massey has been a two-time guest. I'm sure he'll be on in the future as well. He's a fabulous originator, $100 million a year purchase guy in Denver, Colorado with Castle and Cook, and one of the very best speakers I've been around. But Joe has built his business by doing realtor education, helping realtors understand how to use finance to sell more real estate. And as a result, we did a deal with Joe, and we now have all of the courses that he uses to help build his business in Denver. And they're available up on our site at a very nominal cost. You can buy them by the course, you can buy them in a bundle. I just want to make sure people are aware that it's available. You can go up and take a look at it. There's one of them that's free up there. And we also have a video up there to tell you exactly how Joe does this as part of the process. This is one of those deals where Joe shows you the bike, shows you how to get on the bike, shows you how to pedal the bike, and then you can ride the bike to $50 to $100 million a year of additional purchase volume by doing exactly what Joe does. Encourage you to take a hard look at this. Let's get into the data. If you've been following the market this morning, you know that the 10-year fell out of bed early this morning. We had an unemployment number come in below expectations at 4.1%. We had a new jobs data number come in. I'm going to flip over to this slide right here. We had both of them came in hotter than expected. The new job number came in at 256,000 new jobs created for December against an expectation of 155,000. And then unemployment dropped. It was expected to stay at about 4.2. It came down to 4.1, both better than expected as part of that. and the 10-year immediately lost an immense amount of ground. Given the fact that this is December's number, and we're not going to see another number now until sometime mid-February, my takeaway out of this is that we are likely going to be dealing with higher rates than anybody expected, at least for the first quarter of 2025, maybe for the first half of 2025. And I'll go through some additional data here in a minute to kind of bolster that case. But let me just come back to this slide. What data to watch this week, this coming week? We have consumer inflation expectations coming out on Monday. On Tuesday, we have the producer prices index, which is inflation at the wholesale level. On Wednesday, we're going to get the month-over-month core CPI number that the Fed tends to watch closely, as well as the year-over-year core CPI number. On Thursday, we're going to get jobless claims again that actually came in light this week. And then on Friday, we're going to get housing starts. I didn't put all the detail in the slide this week because I think some people get overwhelmed by some of the detail. These are the 6 big data segments that you're going to see released this week through the course of the week. And I think nothing more important than probably the month-over-month core CPI data on Wednesday, followed by the jobless claims on Thursday, will be likely a market mover. If that CPI number comes in hotter than expected, you can expect rates to deteriorate. I've been saying this for a while. I think we have a 20 to 40% chance that we see higher rates over the next quarter or two before we begin to see anything that looks like lower rates. I don't mean to be the bearer of bad news, but I think that's just the reality of the marketplace today in terms of what's going on. So where are we? You can see on the right-hand side of this chart, since the first Fed rate cut, we've had nothing but deterioration in the 10-year. It's gone straight uphill after I think the market and a lot of mortgage companies thought from about June through early September that maybe we were going to be in a little refi boomlet by now. And of course, that's just not the case. Although I'll come back to that in a second. I do think there's opportunity there as well. And we've seen rates deteriorate. And we're now sitting up north of 7 1/8 in most 30-year fixed. I don't think we hit 8%, but I think there's a non-zero chance that we could be up in the mid sevens here over January and February. It's going to be a very difficult winter, has been my message along the way. The MBA purchase and refi application index, as you can imagine, as a result of rates and the holidays, have been down materially. We saw the purchase index drop almost 7% just last week. They're down at some of the lowest levels of the year in both cases. So we continue to be impacted by that. I mentioned earlier that the jobless claims number this week came in strong, meaning fewer people lost their jobs and filed for unemployment. Clearly fewer than was expected at 201,000. So if we see another number next week that's anywhere near this or sub 200,000, again, you could see real deterioration, because what this is suggesting, if you look at that trend, the red line from June through last week, you've seen a reduction in jobless claims, which means the job market has been stronger than originally anticipated. And we continue to see downward movement in jobless claims. Good for the economy, good for people looking for a job, bad for inflation. So that's the short version of that. In addition to that, ADP private jobs was announced on Wednesday. It actually came in light, but as you can see, the government number this Friday today came in more than 2 times that number, which tells you that local and state governments are continuing to add employment. It's going to be interesting to see, to be honest, what's going on with these fires here in Southern California. Remember that Los Angeles County is the single biggest, most populated county in the United States. We are going to lose. The low estimates now are in the 2,000 to 3,000 homes range. The upper estimates are in the 10,000 homes lost range. The fires continue to burn unabated. Some of the biggest fires are 0% contained. The winds are expected to pick up over the weekend. And somebody analogized this to Katrina this morning, except it's massively bigger. It covers much more space as part of it. I know friends who have been evacuated. I know people, personally know people who have lost their homes. And this is going to have a huge impact on employment in the Los Angeles County and the Valley areas, as well as housing costs. Obviously, we were in a housing shortage to begin with in California, and this is certainly not going to help. if you lose 10,000 homes, you have 40,000 people looking for someplace to live. That's the short math on this thing. And this apocalypse is nowhere near done. So keep your eye on that. That's going to impact the market here at some point as that data begins to roil its way through the markets. We also saw the S&P Services PMI Purchasing Manager Index come in strong this past week. What is that? We're in the services side of the economy in the mortgage business. The services side of the economy remains very strong, and the PMI index is an index of purchasing managers working in services companies that continue to buy stuff. And so that index remains strong, which is inflationary in its essence. So what we're seeing, I've talked about crude oil prices for the last couple of months. We've seen a big jump in the last 2 weeks. West Texas Intermediate crude is up almost $5 a barrel in the last couple of weeks. So oil prices are up. The economy remains strong. The employment situation is strong. Wages popped up this morning in the data report. Job creation is strong. There's nothing in there that suggests inflation below 2% anytime soon. You can assume that the Fed is done cutting for quite some time, and we're going to live with these higher than expected rates for some period here going forward, without a doubt. So what are the takeaways? This slide I wrote last night. It's wrong this morning. We've now lost 100 basis points at the top of the chart. Rates could still move significantly higher from here. The Fed is concerned that inflation is not dead and employment continues very strong. I continue to tell you to watch every inflation number and the price of oil. It'll give you a little bit of hint of where rates are headed. There are two interesting refi opportunities, however, that have popped up in the middle of this. And you can actually see the MBA refi index has begun to move up, even with these higher rates, around two key areas. Home improvement, because people with low interest rate mortgages are not leaving their house, they're improving them, and they have immense equity. And secondly, are debt consolidation refis, because consumer debt remains at record highs, cash remains low, delinquencies in consumer debt is climbing, and so the opportunity to reduce someone's overall monthly payments of credit and debt still exists in the marketplace. You should be having these conversations with your existing customers, because I'll guarantee you the servicer that owns the loan on your customer is already having these conversations. So I would be doing video out to my clients. I'd be setting up appointments and doing a full cost analysis review with my customer base today before somebody beats you to it. A little additional data. This is, I think, I've shown a version of this slide before, but we keep hearing that all mortgages are under 4%. It's just not true. So the percentages of mortgages in the 5s and 6s has grown substantively over the last 2 years as a result of new loans made. And so the percentage of low rate mortgages as a percentage of all mortgages outstanding continues to shrink, and the percentage of higher rate mortgages, 5, 6, 7, where you could easily do a home improvement refi or a debt consol refi and still make it very thoughtful for the customer. So I gave you this data this morning for you to take a look at, and buried in here is an opportunity to work with your past customers. Affordability remains challenged. I'm not telling anybody that you don't already know this. Just thought I'd give you this chart to be able to help with customers and or referral sources. And we have seen inventories really pop up in a number of states. This color relief map gives you a little sense of where inventories are up. If you look out to California, it's actually down 13%. That's not going to help with these fires. So California will remain challenged, but markets like Arizona and Texas and Florida are doing really well on the inventory side. And that's a little bit of a function that sales have slowed while demand still remains out there through the process. Little change in the structure of the deck here this week. I'm going to just pop these up very quickly. These are the personal development slides. I often leave these to the end of the conversation, but I found that doing interviews with folks like Diego, who's our guest today, it's easier just to let that run out the rest of the call. So today I gave you how to avoid being a T-Rex, 16 secrets of ultra productive people. Again, I'm a shameless copier of other people's work. These are great ideas, and if you take one or two ideas off this chart and implement them, you can improve your productivity. And in addition to that, I've got 11 habits that'll transform your life in 3 months. Seems pretty aggressive, but I can tell you when I went back to the gym 7 months ago, within 3 months, it really kind of transformed my life, my outlook, my personal physical improvement. And so if you stick to it and embed some of these things, you can absolutely have an impact on your life. And there's this concept of Eat That Frog by Brian Tracy. Some of you are familiar with Brian's work, A Salesperson's Guide to Eat the Frog, which is simply another way of saying do the hard things first. Get it out of the way. Swallow the toad. A lot of ways to say it. I gave you a couple of ideas around that. Maria Elena, before I introduce Diego, our speaker for today, do we have any questions or any hand raising in the chat box?
I don't see any hands, Brian, but there was a question in regards to this call being recorded. Yes, as a reminder, this call is being recorded, and everybody here on the call will get a copy of the recording once it's available. It usually takes about an hour post the call for it to be available. That's all.
Thank you. And we have the deck is up in the site as well, Maria. They'll get a copy of the deck as well, correct?
Yes, they will. And we also have a link to this presentation deck already in the chat.
By the way, I'm going to make one personal request here, folks. If you think you get value out of this call, please tell 5 of your friends in the mortgage business that they should be subscribers to this call. It's like any other business. Your best customers are your best salespeople. And so if you find value in this call every week, please send a link out to 5 friends that you know in the mortgage business and tell them they're out of their frickin' minds to not subscribe to this call, and remind them it's going to be free through the end of March so they can take a look at it and see if they find value. I would consider it a personal favor from anybody on the call. So please do that if you're so inclined.
Excellent. And I'll drop a link to that chat, or sorry, to the subscription in the chat here momentarily.
And so let me introduce our speaker, and then I'm going to take the slide deck down. Diego Sanchez. Diego is the president of HousingWire. And if you guys are not subscribers to HousingWire, I can tell you 2 things that have impressed me. I subscribe to a lot of news services. Literally, I have Flipboard. I have probably 15 periodicals that I subscribe to, from The Economist to the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Washington Post. I'm a voracious reader around these things. But as it relates to the mortgage business, the real estate business, and what we all do for a living, there's probably no organization in the industry that's more prolific today in terms of their coverage than HousingWire is. Diego comes to us this morning from where he lives in New York. He's in the city. I asked Diego to join us today. Diego has an outstanding background, but what he and Clayton Collins have done with HousingWire is nothing short of outstanding. They also provide data to the industry. And so I'm a faithful reader of HousingWire. I'm an occasional speaker for them at their events, and I repost a lot of their work out. And so I'd encourage you to subscribe to HousingWire to stay current in terms of what's going on. But I asked Diego to come on and join us today, and I'm going to take the deck down here as we promote Diego up to the main part of the call. I asked Diego to come on today. And first of all, Diego, welcome. Welcome to the Weekly Roadmap.
Brian, thanks so much for having me. I'm really impressed with your format here and how much value you're bringing this audience.
Oh, thank you. Look, one of the things I'm always impressed by you and Clayton and your entire organization. I always make myself available to all your reporters. I think they've discovered that I got a little media training early in my career, so I learned the fine art of speaking in sound bites, which I know from a reporter's perspective, it makes their job easier. So I've always and I always have to be a little careful. I did Sarah's podcast right after the election, when frankly not very many mortgage executives wanted to get on and talk about the election. I thought, hell, I don't run a mortgage company. I don't care. I'd be glad to give my views. And a lot of people who know me well know that as I have advanced in age, my personal filters have broken, and I've never endeavored to fix them. And so typically people get things unfiltered, which makes for good press and good entertainment. First of all, I want to thank you again for joining. When I asked Diego to come on, he sits in a very interesting seat in the industry, where because he's aware of oftentimes what his reporters are focused on, the types of material that comes across HousingWire that they publish, produce, and are following and are integrated in their access to sources in the industry. I asked Diego to come on this morning and give us his perspective of what he thinks the 2 to 4 key stories that are happening in the mortgage/real estate business. And I think it's mortgage/real estate, home builder, title, kind of that entire complex of industries that his organization is paying attention to, and or from his perspective that he thinks the industry should be paying attention to as well. And so, Diego, again, welcome on board. I don't think I've ever asked you this. Are you a native New Yorker, or you just happen to live in New York now?
I've been in New York for 25 years, but I actually grew up in a rival city in Boston.
Oh, wow.
So my sports allegiances are still with all
Oh,
the Boston teams, which
oh,
probably doesn't strike many people well on this call. But
all right. Look,
yeah,
I'm a born New Yorker. I'm a diehard Yankees fan.
yeah.
I'm a painful Giants fan. But I'm a little bit of a mutt. I'm actually a Boston Celtics fan, and I've also followed the Bruins for years.
Yeah.
And because I grew up on the New York border and just south of Montreal, I grew up as a Canadiens fan. So I'm a little bit of a mutt on that.
Yep.
But hell, who doesn't hate the Red Sox and or the Patriots? So we're gonna give you a pass on that. But my wife is a diehard Patriots fan, diehard Red Sox fan, as are my 2 sons, and I can't even stand it. So
Well, Brian, they only started winning when I left, so
yeah, there you
I
go. There you go. So
don't. So
in any event,
they've been winners since I moved to New
that's right.
York.
So Diego, I'm going to just turn it over to you a little bit. Give us a little bit of your perspective on these key items that you think our audience should be paying attention to, or that from your chair, you see real interest and or potential market impacts of the big stories going on that you guys are paying attention to.
There's so much happening in the housing industry, and ever since I joined HousingWire 6 years ago, it's been nonstop. And so there's any number of stories that we're thinking about and covering, but I boil it down to 4 main themes right now that we're thinking really hard about and covering really closely. So one, you've already talked about it with your deck, mortgage rates and what's happening there. Whether they go up, whether they go down, what are the triggers that will lead to them going up and going down? Super important for our audience. The second story is around inventory of homes available for sale. We're coming off a couple years of really the lowest historical inventory ever. And it was a pretty unhealthy housing market because of that. And we're starting to climb back up. It's interesting with these high mortgage rates, we're actually maybe getting a more healthy housing market from an inventory perspective.
Yes.
So that when those rates drop back down, and they eventually will, right? It's a cyclical industry. There'll be inventory there for people to tap into, which I think is a good thing for the long term. The third thing that we're really paying close attention to is, and you mentioned this again in your deck, what's going on with the servicers? They are building a lot of tech, and they are amassing a big book of servicing rights so that when those rates do dip, they can originate from that book. And so I think we're going to see a lot of the refinance business the next time we see a refi boom go to those servicers, unless people are doing things to protect their servicing book and protect their clients. So that's the third theme that we're thinking a lot about. And then, for the past year, your real estate partners have really been through it. There's been a lot going on in real estate, especially with regards to commissions.
Yep.
There were several very big commission lawsuits that NAR settled towards the end of last year. And the fallout and the rebuild from that settlement is super interesting. And I think what's happening is we are seeing a big flight to quality when it comes to realtors. People are looking to work with real estate agents that are professionals, that know the market, and then have good partners on the financing side. So I think the fallout of the NAR settlement and commission compression, which we are starting to see in several markets, is those real estate agents that just do a couple transactions a year and are kind of on the bubble are falling out. They're going to do something else. So really important to partner with real estate agents that are professionals and that are with that profession for the long term.
We can take these in whatever order you'd like, but just to take your last comment about the realtors, I agree with you. And I think, look, I don't know what you guys are seeing from a HousingWire standpoint, so feel free to have a different view of this. But one, I haven't seen a material change in how the transactions are getting done. In other words, I still see many sellers paying the buyer's commission. The difference being is it's being negotiated up front. There's more transparency. There's disclosures, those kinds of things that are happening. I'm sure at the margins, some transactions are happening differently than maybe they have in the past, but the industry hasn't really, it hasn't thrown up on itself and changed everything overnight. To your point, I am seeing commission compression beginning to happen, but I can tell you, not just people leaving. What I've actually am seeing in a lot of markets, and I'm tied to I have a client that does a ton of work with the top 2% of realtor and real estate teams in the United States. And what they're seeing is that maybe realtor who is in the bottom half of the group historically, to your point, maybe more of a part-timer or a 1, 2, 3 sales a year type agent joining one of the big teams. So the teams that were typically 8, 10, 12 agents on a team, the Brian Hale real estate team, now might be 14 or 15 people as part of the team. And they now can take advantage because they weren't ever great listers. They may have sold somebody in a neighborhood. They did friends and family. They did other kinds of transactions, which is great because if you become part of a bigger team, then you add that volume and it's all good. But they don't have to worry about evolving technology and evolving regulatory compliance. The team leads or somebody handles that for them. And so we're seeing consolidation. A couple of quick pieces of data. I don't have this data yet for 24, but for 23, the top 1.5% of real estate agents in the United States accounted for 68% of all sales.
Yep.
Top 2%, 74%, the top 10%, almost 90%, 80 some odd percent. And so that consolidation is continuing forward, no doubt in my mind in this. And I think the message to originators, which is the bulk of this audience, is make sure you know who you're calling on and why you're calling on that real estate agent as a referral source. Are they in that top 10%? Are they in the top 20% in your market? Are they in the top 30%? Because if they're in the bottom 20% or the bottom 30%, that person's business may or may not exist in the future. And if your business is tied to their business, that's a problem, right? That's a takeaway out of this process. I don't know if you have a perspective on that.
Yeah, Brian, that's really the key takeaway. And I think we may actually see 5% of realtors doing 95%
I
of
agree.
the business.
I agree totally.
As the fallout. And I actually don't think that's a bad thing. I think that professionalization and a flight to quality is a good thing. People should be well represented in the home buying or the home selling transaction. So, but I think that is absolutely the key takeaway. We are going to be doing some research over the next couple of months because our Real Trends business, that's a business that we acquired a couple of years ago. Every year we rank the top agents and team leaders and brokers nationwide. And so we get all sorts of data about really the top 10% of the market. And so we're going to know really shortly once we do those rankings, what that ratio is, 595, 1090. But the key takeaway to your point really is make sure you're partnering with the right agents because the right agents are going to get more and more business.
Yeah, look, if you look on the mortgage side, there's 2,500 originators that are the dominant originators in the industry. And you can see the industry is fighting over those 2,500, right? There's another level down below that still are very productive, right? That are much bigger numbers. But that consolidation is happening in the mortgage business, just as it's happening in the real estate business for that very reason, because they're consolidating, because their clients are consolidating.
Yep.
Originators are consolidating. Let's come back to the inventory comment that you made a little bit. One of the hypotheses I made a presentation this morning at 6 a.m. my time to a home builder in the Atlanta market. This is a pretty good sized home builder, and they are really challenged. The biggest home builders are in their market because everybody wants to be in Atlanta, right? It's a great market, first time home builder in Atlanta. Inventories are coming back. Wall Street firms are buying houses in Atlanta by the bucket, right? So that shortens up inventory because they come in and they buy 5,000 houses or 3,000 houses at a time. One of the hypotheses I have is that inventory is not the same all over the US.
Yep.
And I've harped on this my entire career that there are 374 metropolitan statistical areas, MSAs in the United States. 88 of them account for about 98% of all real estate sold in America, right? But if you then break those down, there's about 650 discrete real estate markets in the US. Each one operates a little bit differently with different sets of competitors and that kind of thing. And so I don't know if you guys see this maybe in your data business or others.
Yep.
I always worry about quoting national numbers because what I can tell you, I have a view that averages, the term average, are statistics for the weak of mind, right? Because, if you have 1 foot in the fire and 1 foot on an ice cube, on average, you're good, right? But you got 1 foot burning up and the other foot's freezing to death, right? So not good. And so I really think this is a game of discrete, granular understanding of markets. How do you guys see that? Is that something you look at? Is something you're kind of focused on?
It absolutely is, and you are absolutely right. I think that you can simplify a little bit and say there's probably a tale of two markets right now. And so if you look at the South and the Southwest, those were boom areas during the pandemic. And they are now areas for a variety of reasons. And you have to go state by state and sometimes city by city
Right.
to understand these reasons. But for a variety of reasons, places like Texas, Florida, Arizona are racking up the inventory right now. And then if you look at the Northeast and the Midwest, so these are some of the areas that people actually left during COVID.
Right.
There's actually very little inventory in a lot of the cities and states in those areas. And so you're absolutely right. I think it's really important to drill down. And we actually acquired another business exactly 2 years ago called Altos Research,
Right.
which gives us zip code by zip code across the country a view on the housing market. So what's available for sale, what the price points are. And so we're able to drill down as local as is needed. But we do have a national audience. So a lot of times we try to simplify it as much as we possibly can. So we'll write about a region, or we'll write about an important state, or we'll talk about this tale of two markets, the Northeast and the Midwest versus the South and the Southwest.
Right.
But you're 100% correct. I think if you are a branch manager or top LO, or you want to be one of those things, you have to know what's going on in your area and in your local housing market. And so Altos Research is one place where you can find that data, but there are other sources. I just think you have to access one of those sources.
I couldn't agree more. Okay, I think that your point, and one of the things I harp on this call all the time to the folks who are subscribers and attend this call or listen to it, you have, and I said this to a group of originators this morning that I was on with prior to this, you have an obligation, I believe, you have an obligation to be a professional in your business. And what does that mean, right? If I use the example this morning, if you went to a doctor because your knee was hurting and he came in and he checks you out and has a couple of ideas, but thinks, you know what, here's the deal. Here's a couple of medical books. Why don't you go ahead and read them, see if you can figure it out on your own, right? It'd be considered malpractice. And so if you want to be considered a pro, you have to self-educate. You have to make sure you're contemporary. I can't tell you the number, and you don't know this about me, but in my history, I've done about 175 contractual joint ventures through the years. Big builders and realtors. I put the KB JV together years ago. I've done it 4 times with KB. When you do it with a realtor, oftentimes when you talk to the owner, you say, where are your loans closing today, right? When you sell real estate, who's doing your business? And when you talk to individual agents or owners of real estate companies, they'll tell you, oh yeah, this. Here's the funny part. It's almost never true. Reality different than their perception because they didn't go find out the data. They know that they referred the customer to ABC Mortgage down the street. But guess what happened? ABC took the app. Then the customer went up online, found a better price over here at Rocket for somebody, and ended up closing with Rocket. Now, the individual agent doesn't care because the deal closed, right? Got my commission, boom, we're done, we're out, it's all good. But the point being is if it's very easy to not know your own market because everything is changing so rapidly around you. I use this T-Rex metaphor all the time of don't be a T-Rex in search of a tar pit, right? T-Rex ruled the world for 300 million years, top of the food chain. Have you seen one lately? No. Why? What happened? The environment changed. He had a brain the size of a walnut and he couldn't evolve, right? He couldn't evolve to what was going on around him. His environment changed. Your environment changed. It's one of the reasons I think you should be reading housing. I'm not shilling for HousingWire. Read. Start first with read. Be informed, right? And then I know through your Real Trends and Altos and others, you bring a lot of that data forward into some of the work you do in HousingWire. I just encourage people to stay current in their own market, stay current nationally, but stay current in their own markets as well, because you can then help your peers around you by helping them understand what's actually going on, beneath you.
I completely agree. And if, when we bought the Altos business, the product, their SaaS product was built for real estate agents. But
Right.
what was really interesting when we dug into the customer base that existed, a lot of them were not real estate agents. They were actually LOs and title agents trying to educate themselves so that they could educate and win partnerships with real estate agents.
Yes.
So a lot of the customer base were these title agents and LOs who were becoming experts in their local market, in their county, in their state. If they were a multi-state operator, whatever geographic footprint they had, they wanted to make sure that the people in their business were experts on those geographies. And so, again, so important to be that local market expert for your customers, but also if you want to develop partnerships with real estate agents.
All right. So group, look, for those of you who've been listening on this call for the last couple of months, you've only heard this from me 6,000 or 7,000 times. You're the CEO of your own business. And CEOs, I'm sure as president, Diego has to do this as well. He has to analyze his business all the time. What's going on around him, who his competitors are, what's happening, what's his subscription rates doing, all those kinds of things. We have to do the same thing as an originator to have a sense of what's really going on, be a pro, think about these different things, use data. What Diego just talked about, individual originators and title reps pulling data to understand their market and then use that to go back and pursue business, right? There's the tactical takeaway out of this process. Data, 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 data. I know I've got some regional managers and area managers on the call from time to time. Please don't take this wrong. If I was investing in running a mortgage company today, I wouldn't be investing in you guys. I'd be investing in financial analysts who could help you and help your originators identify the targeted agents and people in your market to pursue, and specifically how to pursue them with what products and what services helps their customer base based on where they're closing loans today. And so just encourage you to do that. And it's one of the reasons I wanted Diego on the call today, was just to talk more broadly about those things that are happening, how we see it, and what's going on nationally and then locally as part of that process. Diego, you touched on the servicers, and it's an area that I've been trying to help my audience with for the last couple of months as well. Let me start with the premise. My premise is there are some big servicers, PennyMac, Mr. Cooper, Freedom, there's a bunch, New Res, there's a bunch of them floating around out there that are acquiring MSRs from small to medium size, and even in some cases, larger mortgage banking companies, brokers, others, aggregating them. And they're not generally doing it for their health, right? They do it because there's a business there in aggregation, but also they have built out these huge retention platforms. And I think like never before, Rocket, all these guys, like never before, these servicers are well prepared for the battle ahead. Speak to that from what you're seeing a little bit around that side. You mentioned technology and other pieces, because I think people are underestimating the potential impact to their own origination opportunity by not staying connected with those consumers after close,
Yep.
because the servicers are.
Yeah. Brian, if mortgage rates weren't being so crazy,
Right.
I would say that this is the biggest story in mortgage, by far. And the reason I say that is, I've had Jay Bray of Mr. Cooper on my Powerhouse podcast.
Yep, I know Jay well.
I had Varun
Okay.
Krishna of Rocket. I just published that episode yesterday. I have a podcast recording scheduled with Baron Silverstein of New Res later today.
I was on the phone with
And
Barrett earlier this week.
yeah, and these guys aren't messing around. And the way Jay described it is he wants to build a fortress business that does well no matter what rates do, right? So they're acquiring a lot of servicing rights. And so if rates stay high or go up, the value of those MSRs do really well for them.
Yep.
If rates go down, they've been building a ton of tech, including integrating artificial intelligence to be able to originate from their book. And so when you look at the Q3 earnings for Mr. Cooper and for Rocket and for Rhythm Capital, which is the parent of New Res,
Right.
wow, they did really well in that couple week window when rates declined into the low sixes and high fives. They knocked it out of the park, and it was all refi business. And so I would expect they're not stopping in terms of acquiring MSRs and also in terms of building tech. And some of the stuff that they can do with AI to analyze sentiment and give offers to homeowners in real time, for refinancing or for home equity, it's starting to get really, really powerful. And so, like a lot of the IMB CEOs that I've been speaking with, are thinking more and more about, keeping on, hanging on to those servicing rights. And I think to your point earlier in the call, if you're an LO or a production leader, wow, you got to stay in front of your customers because they're getting once rates drop a little bit, they're getting all sorts of calls from their servicers with really compelling offers
Can I
that are
correct one thing?
Yeah,
I
go
don't
ahead.
think they're waiting for rates to drop. Those servicers are talking to your customers
Yes.
all the time. Think about it. I mean, it's tax season, right? Everybody's paying
Yep.
tax bills, right? There's a lot of interaction. There's a lot of opportunity to remind people and to integrate with them. And my message to the audience today, your servicer interacts with your past customer at least 12 times a year, right? Then somebody makes a payment. It's probably 24 times a year. It's plus they're marketing to them. They're using AI. They're using propensity to prepay models. They're using all of these things. They know which customers are going to refi first and when, or what need they may have, or the fact that they went out and took on some additional consumer debt because they run a FICO match off the portfolio, and they can see that this guy or gal now has more consumer debt. Ooh, there's a debt consolidation refi opportunity for that customer, right? Or we sell equity products, and so we can give them a second mortgage or a HELOC or whatever the case may be. If you don't think that the servicers are talking to your customers that you think you have in your CRM every day, you're dead wrong.
Yeah.
And so for you to stay in front and to have an opportunity, I would argue that if you're talking to them every month, you're way behind. You're way behind. And so you have to think about ways to be both social media, both CRM, both marketing. It has to be thoughtful. It can't be, refrigerator magnet. It has to be value add communication because that's what the servicers are doing. Let me come back to you, Diego, your continued thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, I think you nailed it. So it's just really important to stay close to your customer, more important than ever before, because my prediction is that these next refi booms that we see, 80-90% of those opportunities are going to be captured by those big servicers.
Right. And the answer there is because they've already been captured.
Yeah.
Right. They've already put a position in place that says to that consumer, whatever bid you get, come back to me first. Right. Because they can roll the escrows. They don't have to come up with the tax escrows. They can make it very convenient. They can do these things like that. And they're, by the way, they're very good at it.
Yeah, but I don't want to give the impression that it's a lost cause
Not at all. Oh, look, some people
because
are doing a very good job at retaining their own book, but it's not by happenstance. That's my point.
yeah, absolutely. And you know, if you did well by your customer and put them in that home or help them refinance, they're going to remember that. They're just gonna they're not going to remember it if you're not staying in consistent touch with them and adding value.
Correct. I have the good fortune to be able to speak at your economic conference coming up here next month. I'm looking forward to that. One of the messages I'm going to be interviewing somebody from Zelman about kind of how they see the industry and the market going forward. But one of my messages to the audience, this will be a little bit different audience, probably more C-suite audience on your event in Dallas. But one of my messages, you touched on interest rates being a big, topic you guys are focused on. I have a simple view of this business, which is the two things that impact the mortgage business the most: interest rates and regulatory environment. And we know that we're likely to get somewhat of a change in the regulatory environment at the federal level. I'm not here to talk politics, whether that's good, bad, or indifferent. It's going to change. Most people think it'll be more accommodating, meaning less strident, but heads up. Last time this happened, all the states raced in and made it more difficult at the state level. So you're not going to escape it, A. B, most of the federal laws have 10-year look-back periods. So be careful what you do in the next 4 years, because there could be a different administration sometime later that can come back and come after you for any bad acts. So just be smart. My point being is the two biggest impacts on the business you can't control.
Right.
So now the question becomes, what should you do? If you can't control the two biggest variables in the business, you can only control what you can control. And so I don't know, Diego, if you see or you have commentary or articles coming out of that. One of my messages, by way of preempting my message at your economic forum, is going to be, you can spend all day looking out the window trying to decide what the Fed's going to do next, or you can go to work on your business.
Right.
I recommend the second, right? Go to work on your business. Think about these things that we just talked about with your sales force. Are they talking to their CRM clients, their past clients, their in-process clients, their referral network, how they're growing their funnel and doing those kinds of things as a part of the process? The regulatory thing is going to be what it's going to be. You can maybe influence it through PACs and political action things and things on Capitol Hill, but probably you can't. Now the big thing is they're going to privatize Fannie and Freddie. I'll take that bet. I don't think they will. I think they'll talk about it a lot. They'll raise a lot of money on it, but it's harder to do than it sounds. You have any perspective on that, kind of what you're seeing in either your data, your customer base, whatever? Because my message is going to be stop looking out the window and trying to figure this out. Go to work.
My perspective is it's been one of the most, if not the most difficult origination markets ever over the past year and a half, 2 years.
Yes.
However, there are still lenders grabbing market share. There are still production leaders grabbing market share for their team. And there are still LOs who are growing and gaining market share. And so, for me, it's just all about staying focused on growing your own business and ignoring the noise. And so, like, I'm not an LO. I never have been. I run a business media business, but we got hit by this difficult market, and so I have really adjusted my practices over the last couple of years so that I don't get distracted by how difficult it is, and I'm doing the same things every day to be successful. And so for me, it's just daily habits, daily practices, and understanding that despite how bad it is, there are still people out there who are gaining market share, whether it's in mortgage, real estate, or in business media. So yeah, I think you're right. It's, like, you just can't control a lot of the stuff that impacts the business, but you can control yourself and what you work on every day.
No doubt. So we have about 5 or 6 minutes left of the day. Maria Elena, would you take a look in the chat? If somebody raised their hand, let's just take any open questions that may be out there that I haven't noticed, or If anybody has a question, feel free to hit the raise the hand button as well for Diego or myself.
I don't see a question, just some comments in the chat
See a
agreeing
lot of
with the
commentary.
conversation. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. No questions at this time and no hands raised. Oh, actually, there is one question. Why are the
Why are
Red
the Red
Sox
Sox
so
so cheap?
cheap?
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Uh,
Other than that, no other questions or hands raised.
All right. Wow, nice shot on the Red Sox side. Well, look, first of all, Diego, I'll give the floor back to you. Any parting comments or thoughts that you want to share with the audience? Again, before I give it to you, I'd encourage anybody in the business to be a subscriber. I'm not on commission with Diego. I'm just telling you that I have read every periodical in this industry for the better part of 40 years. There are some very good ones besides HousingWire. I would just tell you there's none that, in my view, that have a better perspective, a better team that's producing more data supported insights than HousingWire, owing a little bit to the acquisitions that they've made and not relying on other people's data, but being able to generate their own. And so, with that said, I'd encourage people to do it. And in fact, Diego, when we get off this, if you could have somebody shoot us a QR code
yep.
to be able to subscribe, we'll be sure to include it in the deck that's out.
Great.
As part of, I should have asked you that on the front end. But any last thoughts or comments as we come up? We got about 3 or 4 minutes left.
Yeah, absolutely. So housingwire.com is
There
the
you go.
website.
That's the easy
And
one.
that's the easy one. And we are incorporating a lot of the insights and data and analysis that we're doing across these various brands into the HousingWire mothership. So the way that we are thinking about the housing industry is holistically. So we aren't just reporting on mortgage, we aren't just reporting on real estate. No, we're looking across mortgage, real estate, title, valuation, home building. We're thinking a lot about multifamily because we think it's all interrelated and it's important as a professional in any one of those verticals to understand what is going on in the other verticals. And so that's really I think our superpower as a business media company focused on housing is really thinking about housing holistically and incorporating that great data. So housingwire.com, altosresearch.com, is an excellent resource for folks who want to become their local market expert and maybe leverage that expertise to form more partnerships with real estate agents. And then I'll point out one newsletter that we recently kind of overhauled, and I think it's really perfect for this audience. And you can just sign up for our newsletters at housingwire.com/newsletter. It's called Lending Life, and it is very focused on LOs and production leaders. And so it has some news, but it also has a lot of coaching from well-known industry personalities and tactics and tips and kind of more service journalism, how-to type stuff, as opposed to being straight news, which historically, we have been. So we are trying to do something a little bit different with Lending Life. It comes out daily, Monday through Thursday. And I encourage people to check it out. I think it's a really neat
I'm a subscriber,
relaunch.
and
Yeah.
so I can validate it, and then I will offer if I can ever be of assistance by way of content on there as well. Let me check one more time. Anybody have any questions or issues for Diego? Besides, if he has any more good shots at the Red Sox, we'll take those.
It doesn't look like it.
All right. Well, Diego, first of all, I can tell just because people have hung in through the entire call. You can tell by the participant list, this has been an interesting conversation that people found value in. And so, look, let me just say publicly, I appreciate my collaboration with HousingWire a great deal. Appreciate the relationship both at the top of the house and with all of your reporters and others that I've had a good fortune to work with through the process. I'm anxious to see you in Dallas at the Economic Summit, and my team has already registered for the gathering in Colorado Springs here in the mid part of the year. convincing me to go to the Broadmoor is an easy call.
Don't have to twist your arm on that one, right?
Yeah, exactly. I would bring my clubs, but instead I'm bringing my fly rod because there's some great fly fishing right close by. So
There is.
I used to live about 25 miles north of there. And so looking forward to going back to that and participating. And so again, I thank you for taking an hour and being with us and sharing your thoughts with the audience. And if I can ever be of assistance to you and or your team, don't hesitate to ask. We're getting a lot of applause out of the session, so we appreciate it. Any last comments, and then we'll likely bring the call to an end.
No last comments except Brian, thank you for having me on. We really appreciate you at HousingWire and look forward to continuing our partnership in 2025.
Great. My best to you, my best to everybody. It's the 10th of January. We got a really tough year ahead of us, I think, certainly the first half. Look forward to seeing you on the road. We'll be announcing some additional new speakers here shortly. On the 24th, we have Shant Benajian, the #1 originator in the country, coming on to talk about. In fact, I'm on with Shant this afternoon preparing for that session. And so we look forward to additional sessions. We'll see you on the road. My best to everybody. Have a great week. Thanks, Diego.